We welcome you to the Learning Forward podcast, Season 10, Episode 15. Today, Anvesha will be your host for the event. The goal of life is to live in agreement with nature. But we live in a world where equity is preached but not practiced. We never pay heed to those who cannot complain, and their silence has ultimately made them victims. Today, we have on our podcast Nirmal Ghosh, author of Blue Sky, White Cloud. Nirmal is one of those rare people who has demonstrated that our power to share is our greatest asset by writing sincerely about the sentiments of the animals in his latest book. Would you like to speak a few words about the book, your life, and your love for nature, sir?
Certainly, thank you very much. I'm really happy to do this. My earliest recollection was actually basically as a baby, as probably 1 or 2 years old, being taken to the jungle by my parents in India. All right, and my one of my early recollections was waking up in the middle of the night on a charpai outside a forest rest house in Sariska, now Sariska Tiger Reserve in Rajasthan. It was summer, so we were all sleeping outside the forest rest house in the middle of the jungle, really. And I woke up at night and there was a big Nilgai bull next to me eating the grass right next to me. And I was like, 1 year old or something. So I got into, I studied English. I read a lot. Thankfully, I read a lot. It's very important to read good writing, not just newspapers and online little bits and pieces everywhere, which is what we do a lot nowadays, but to read really good quality writing. And I was always writing. And then I got into a job and a career and all that. And I continued my affinity for wildlife. And later on in life, I developed a particular interest in elephants and spent a lot of time in the jungle observing elephants, writing about elephants, and so reading up on elephants and so on and so forth. And one thing I learned from the elephants is that elephants are like people. When you meet a stranger, you don't walk up to a stranger and give him or her a hug just like that, right? You namaste, or you shake hands, you talk to each other with some respect, and then you get to know each other. So I learned this by watching elephants in the jungle. When you come upon a herd of elephants, they observe you. It's like you're walking into a room full of people. They observe you, and each elephant has a different personality. And that personality is shaped by their experiences. If they grew up, if they experience something as a young calf, if they experience, for example, being chased away by humans, they would carry that fear in their minds about humans. And the same thing with tigers. For a long, long time, tigers avoided humans, absolutely like the plague, because they were shot by humans. They were killed by humans. Of course, being a top carnivore, being a predator, they also did their share of killing. If you look up at the statistics in, for example, a place like Singapore, way back, tigers used to kill hundreds of people. But then, humans almost wiped them out. So that they carry that fear in their DNA. And the reason we see tigers more often now is, of course, the population has increased because we've been successful in saving the tiger, which is amazing. But they also have not been shot at for several generations. So they don't have that. They're not terrified of humans, and they get somewhat habituated. But they're never entirely wild. They're never entirely used to humans still. They still have their own agency. They still have their own spaces and their own ecological niche that they occupy. They merely tolerate humans. And I think some of us make the mistake of thinking, elephants are so cute, tigers are so cute and all that, and getting all, it's emotional and anthropogenic about, thinking about animals in human terms, projecting ourselves onto animals. So I think that is a mistake, because if you spend a lot of time with animals, even with birds, I had pet ducks when I was growing up. you develop bonds, and the animals in their own way, they are survivors. They're thinking for themselves in their own way, which is completely,
Yes.
it's a parallel universe, which we know nothing of, basically. And we just overlap slightly, and we are part of that universe. And we are, because of our technology and our complicated brains and all, our lives have become extremely complex, whereas their lives remain basically simple. And that is something which strikes me a great deal when I'm out in the wilderness, in the middle of the jungle, and in the presence of a bull elephant, or in the presence of like saurus cranes, even in the fields. You realize how needlessly complex our lives have become, and how we've lost touch with the rhythms, really, of nature. How many of us, we live in buildings, how many of us see the moon rise or the sun rise every morning? We don't.
Yes.
We're in walls.
Yes. So thank you so much, sir. It's actually very interesting to know about how even animals have their own personalities and how they as well form perceptions about humans. After all, they are also living beings. But apart from that, if we talk about your book, Blue Sky, White Cloud is a compilation of three novellas. A novella is a short novel, and this tale revolves around the lives of three distinct animals who live in varying geographies and current independent views. Still, somehow deep down, they're all interconnected. So, if you could please elaborate a bit on your book.
Well, the first, if we talk about Blue Sky, White Cloud, the first story is of an elephant, which an elephant lives as long as a person does, as human beings do. Elephants,
Yes,
60
yes, yes.
years. Yeah. So the idea was to trace the life cycle of the elephant and what the elephant experiences, the environment changing around the elephant, much as it changes around everybody, around us as well. So the idea was, an elephant calf, and again, shaped by the experiences of the calf as when he's young. He's caught by humans, and then he manages to get away, but he has that fear in him of humans. And then, because there's rising man animal conflict in many parts of India, and especially, I would say, with elephants, because elephants they have vast territories and home ranges. They move over hundreds of kilometers, and the forest has been fragmented, and there's fields in the middle of their old habitat, and growing things like they like rice paddies, for example. They love rice paddy. So they come into conflict, and they're shot at, and speared, and all kinds of terrible things happen to elephants in the process of this. So the story traces the life cycle of the lifespan of this elephant, and what the elephant sees. And a lot of it is what the elephant observes of human society, conflict, war, and all that. And there's a sense of, I would say, there's a sense of inevitability about how it will end. The second story is about a
A
leopard,
leopard, yes.
right? Spirit of the hills. And that is the locale for that is basically Uttarakhand, Himachal, you could say, or any, but Uttarakhand really is the locale for that. And I've seen many leopards in the hills, and leopards is also, for me, actually seeing a leopard is more special than seeing a tiger nowadays. And the leopards also go through a lot. They in expanded human habitation has cut into their habitat. They are forced to wander around, sometimes near villages, and then you have stray dogs and goats and pigs and cattle and whatnot. So, they're tempting for a leopard. The prey base in the hills sometimes has suffered. The barking deer have dwindled in numbers. So it's tough for them to survive. And then they also have conflict with humans. And there have been instances, of course, where leopards have been, caged and killed by people and all that. So I sort of, again, traced the life of this particular leopard, and also a person, a human being, whose destiny was basically intertwined with this leopard. So that was the second story. And the third one, Blue Sky, White Cloud, is about bar-headed geese, which are the highest flying migratory birds in the world. I mean, as I say in the story, some birds go around the Himalayas, some birds go through the Himalayas in the mountain passes, but the bar-headed geese go over the Himalayas. They've actually been heard from Everest.
Yes.
And so it's a remarkable, miracle. It's a remarkable magic of nature. The bird migration in general is an amazing thing, is an amazing phenomenon. And the
Yes.
bar-headed geese are very special. Yeah. So that's basically it.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And as you said, they go over the Himalayas. We actually believe that, birds don't register what we say. But birds, when they are migrating, they're actually very intelligent species that they can see the weather and they're able to decipher the conditions for migration. So we should actually take a look at it from a very equal perspective. Now, moving on, I believe it is vital to write about what we know simply for authenticity. So, what was your process of writing these three novellas? What set off that spark and how did you go about it?
But I'm glad you said right about what we know. I mean, you can write about things that you don't know about, that you haven't experienced, but you have to be a particular kind of writer. But for me, it is my time spent with wildlife and in the wilderness has meant a great deal to me. It's very emotional for me and existential. And I in all almost all the experiences in the books, all the places I describe, the people I describe, they are not based on any particular actual person or place, but they are amalgamations of various people I have met, various stories I have heard, various places I have been. So sometimes they all combine into one. Sometimes they're bits and pieces I pick and choose. That's how I approached it. And also, if you see the third story, Blue Sky, White Cloud, I wrote that during the COVID pandemic when our sense of our own mortality was heightened because there was so much illness and death all around. So many of us even lost, loved ones. So that played a part in the plot of the third story. One of the challenges in writing about these things is that nothing, like I said, human lives are very complex. There's always something happening. We're all very busy, but nothing much happens in the wild. It's all very simple. It becomes complicated because humans interfere. But otherwise, the life of a wild animal is fairly simple. And it is quite challenging, I found. And I like the challenge. I love writing about it. To write about uh, the animal's life in a sort of engaging, in a way that sustained the narrative.
Yes, sir. That is so wonderful. And I really enjoyed knowing about the sequence that went behind this. Often, we humans, we assess animal intelligence. Whenever we do that, we tend to take a very anthropocentric view. We see animals, but we are actually supposed to meet and get to know them. I personally think that being humble is the key to striking a relationship with nature itself. So, what do you believe is the key to establishing a relationship with our environment, and how did you do it?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, spot on about being humble. I think human beings are full of arrogance and hubris. That's the word anthropocentric, which I was actually struggling to remember earlier. But thank you for for reminding me of that word. That's how we tend to see the world, because I like to think sometimes that when we have come across something we don't understand, or something that is really powerful, much more powerful than us, we do one of two things: we either worship it or we kill it. And because we are obsessed with control, and that's quite natural. We have to control our own environment. That's what we are. That's who we are as a species. But we have lost that empathy, that understanding of the environment. We see ourselves as outside nature, not subject to nature's
Yes, sir.
laws. That's why, That's why when we go through episodes like the pandemic, we are reminded of our place in the world. This is this virus which you cannot even
Yes.
see. And
Yes.
you know what it did to us. You're sort of reminded that you're just actually a tiny little cog in this vast and complex wheel of life on the planet, right? And I think we've lost it. I think, spending time with animals, spending time in the wilderness is very important to because we build ourselves artificial environments. Our city environments are artificially built for our own well-being and our control. And we have a sort of fear of nature. We worry about things out there that can eat us. Bears. There was a very good book called The Monster of God by David Quammen, um, which
Yes,
talks
sir.
about humans' fear of these big predators who can actually kill us and eat us, right? But I've been in situations where I've been very vulnerable to a particular in an encounter in the jungle with an animal. Once a tiger, a couple of times with elephants, and it's just you have to be humble. You realize that you're in the presence of something which is way more powerful and can kill you in a second. Then it sort of gives you a bit of a perspective in life.
Yes, sir. That was great. And it is always better to bend than break. I heard that somewhere. And now moving on, Blue
Yes.
Sky is a heart touching tale that echoes a powerful message of empathy and compassion. Amidst all that you do, sir, how do you manage out time to continue to foster your passion for writing?
For me, it is almost like therapy to write creatively because I'm a journalist, as you know, and I write all the time and I follow news all the time. And one of the phenomena of our age, of the times we live in, is that we are inundated with information. As a journalist, you can't opt out. You have to keep scanning, keep in touch with the news. You have to keep following everything. So your life and your mind becomes extremely crowded, and crowded with a lot of the time very negative things. It's a
Yes.
lot of bad news we're dealing with every day. So for me,
Yes.
creative writing is a way, and I live in the States. So creative writing, and in this case, writing about the jungles in India and people in India, locales in India, is a way of me paying homage to where I came from, places I grew up in, the experiences I had, sharing them, and escaping from this constant drumbeat of bad news or anxiety that is very characteristic of our world today. So it's almost like therapy. I have to write.
Okay, sir. I believe writing is like therapy for almost everyone. And even I feel like we all find solace in writing. So thank you so much for your time, sir. Now I'll invite over Sandeep, sir, and Rishona. They can also ask a few questions over here.
Thank you, Anvesha. Yeah, Nirmal, I'm sure you must be in a tight spot with all the tough questions. I only want to ask you one thing. When you write, and you always mention simplicity, simplicity, for our going to be writers, for our would be authors, how does one develop this simplistic style of writing and communication?
Well, I think it depends on how one wants to express oneself, And that's how that I strive for simplicity, but that's because I've been highly influenced also by number one, the stuff I write about is, like I said, wildlife and all life in the jungle, the life cycle of a wild animal. It's basically simple. It's not very complex. But I've also read writers whose simplicity I admire. I like classical Japanese poetry, which is very simple, very minimalist, captures an entire scene, an entire emotion in something like 3 lines. I like the writings of Peter Mattison, for example. The Snow Leopard is one of my favorite books. Very lyrical, yet very, very minimalist in a very Zen-like style. In fact, he was practicing Zen Buddhism at the time. In fact, that's probably why it's written like that. So I think to each his own, really, to each his or her own. It depends on what you're writing about and the narrative and the plot, etc. Whether it's fiction, non-fiction, etc. I think it's very important as a journalist also to keep it simple, so that people understand it. But one can get carried away with a lot of prose, and it's tempting sometimes, a lot of verbosity. But I try to keep it simple. I think it's probably my journalistic training as well. So it's a combination of all these things.
Thank you for your simplicity and for telling our young writers or wannabe future big writers as how to make life simple. Today's show has essentially brought two interesting things out: the humility and simplicity, which we as humans must value and respect. I just want to mention one more thing. In all the three stories, there are three different heroes, actors, if I may call them, because for me, reading books is actually visualization to the ultimate. So I have Ronesh on one end, I have Hari Singh on the other end in the second novella. Sorry, I'm giving out the names of characters. And I have Nadia in the third one. Now, each of your characters are very different. Their thought, their minds all work very, very differently, which for me was great beauty. But is there a common thread between these three characters in the three novellas? Nadia, who left me heartbroken. Hari Singh, who suffered so much in life in the name of his service. And Ronesh in his call of duty. Now, what do you think is the common between the characters you so visualize and put together as actors in your plots?
I think what's common is a sense of destiny, and fate, and also conflict, because they are conflicted by what they are doing. They do not want to do, with the exception of Nadia. Nadia is more fate and destiny, right? Chance encounters. I'm fascinated by chance encounters. You may meet somebody who completely changes your life, for example, right? And this theme has been explored in literature many, many times, in film and all that. But with the other two, it's also conflict, because they don't want to do what they are doing. It's a call of duty, as you said, in Hira Singh's case. And they would much rather not be doing what they are doing. So that is the common thread.
Thank you. I'm glad we are doing what we should be doing, talking about the book, appreciating the blue sky, white cloud, river storm, and above all, you're being close to our locale, our mountains. And each of us, I believe somewhere at least, have a common soul. And that soul connects us with nature, which I think was the strongest thing I took away from your book. Thank you, Anvesha, for letting me ask my 2 cents of questions. I really appreciate what Nirmal does, what you do. And I'm sure Rishona also is waiting on the sidelines to say her 2 bits. Rishona would like to ask you something, Nirmal.
Thank you, sir. It was an absolute pleasure to listen to you. So I would like to ask you a couple of questions. The first thing, are there people that you have met that relate a lot to the characters like Nadia, Hira Singh, Vivek, and Ronesh? And did they inspire you to write, or who do you relate to the most?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, they have not directly inspired me to write anything, but I have a very active imagination, and I form characters in my mind, and they are, again, an amalgamation of many people I have met. I have my experiences trekking in the mountains, dropping in, meeting a sadhu here, dropping in at a shrine there, hanging out with forest guards, with mahouts, that kind of thing. Drinking chai in the mountains, like that. And I've also, as a journalist, I have been to, as a foreign correspondent, I've actually been very fortunate to be in some really, really special places, seen some special places, met special people. And I think my life, thanks to my fate or whatever, karma, I think my life has been enriched a lot by the people I've met and the places I've been there. And so I draw on all those experiences.
And so, since you are an animals and nature lover, and I did notice the photograph of elephants hung up on your wall behind you. So, what connected you to these animals? I mean, you mentioned that you grew up with nature, but is there something in particular that really bonded this love for animals?
Yeah, that elephant, that's the David Shepherd print, which has been with me since I was a kid. My dad had it, so then I inherited it. So I have it behind me. That's my connection back to those days when I used to see this painting when I was a kid. Um, I don't. I think I had of course pets, ducks. I had ducks once. I had a pet goat actually, and I was very attached to them. I think it's very important to grow up among animals. Then you sort of develop. You're caring for another living being, and you care for another living being apart from a human. Um, elephants elephants affected me a great deal again because I felt a tremendous affinity because elephants are so intelligent and they're like people again, as I said before. You feel you're in the presence of a character. Uh, uh, that character has a story. That character has a history and a life, and you have a lot to learn from these characters. So I felt a sort of strange emotional empathy, I suppose, with elephants, and I ended up working on elephant conservation and whatnot, trying to protect their habitat and things. And I had a couple of interesting experiences, and more recently, I'll tell you quickly, if I may, a small experience I had in Thailand, which I've written about. I was in a sanctuary with elephants, uh, and we were staying in a little clearing in the jungle where the rangers' quarters were, and I was in my sleeping bag, and it was cold. It was a sleeping bag, and I was on a wooden platform with a roof and nothing else. And in the middle of the night, I woke up. There was a loud bang, and I woke up, and there was this huge wild elephant in must. He was a makna, the tuskless male, and he was in must. I could smell, when the testosterone comes out of the gland. He was right next to me, and I moved slightly, and he saw the movement, and he turned and came towards me, and I was helpless in my sleeping bag. And he walked right up to the edge of the platform. I scooted sideways about 6 inches, maybe 1 foot, but I then froze, and I didn't move a muscle. And he reached out his trunk and sniffed me, and his trunk was 6 inches from my face. He sniffed my entire body up and down, and he was like looming over me. I was helpless on the ground. I just kept absolutely still. My heart was hammering. My brain was racing as what to do, what contingencies, what can I do if he comes for me, but he won't come for me because it's a wooden platform. He will not step on it. Elephants know what they're doing, right? They don't do things stupidly. They know where they're stepping. They will not step on something which will not take their weight. So all these things were going through my head, and I did not even twitch. And I also said, hey, in my mind, I was saying, I've been on your side, elephant side, for a long time. I've done a lot of stuff for you. So, I'm okay. I'm not a threat. It's very important to convey that you're not a threat. And then he just withdrew and walked off. And I'll never forget that. So, if you are humble, if you treat animals with respect, give them space, then you will be rewarded with an empathy, which will vastly enrich your life.
Yes, sir. I agree with you that it is important to have a mutual respect and care for the animals. And it was great to hear your experience in Thailand. And I think a mistake that we all make is that we show ourselves as a threat to them, which makes them also react. But if we become friends with them, then I think it'll be just perfect and there'll be no fighting and killing of animals. So I think we should have that friendship with them. And I would like to ask a last question, that your book's title is based on the third story, that is Blue Sky, White Cloud. So what is so special about that one story that made you choose it as the title of your book?
That's a really good question. It's a story with a lot of human emotion in it. And it's a story about high-flying migratory geese, the power-headed geese, which fly so high. It's a story about, Nadia once she's lying on her back in the middle of the wetland in Mongolia, and she's looking up at the sky. It's a story about the larger biosphere we inhabit. It's more of a romantic story, with chance encounters. What the minister does, the way he goes to the valley, is a pilgrimage. It's a pilgrimage because he had this chance encounter with this other person who affected his life, and that was a fleeting encounter. It was cut short just like that. So I think that the message also for me is that we cannot take anything for granted. We must live every day as if it were potentially the last. Not take anybody for granted, not take any person for granted. So I think that's why I chose that as the title story, because it's more on a level, it's more romantic. It's slightly dreamy and idealistic in a way. This is the kind of thing you want to see happen. The chance encounter leads to some extraordinary quest for something, and and that's a positive story. It is really, if you notice, it's a happy ending in a way. It's a sad story, but it's also a very happy ending.
Yes, thank you for taking out the time to be with us here today and for answering our questions.
My pleasure. Anytime. Thank you very much for doing this. I should thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your time. And it was indeed amazing to be here alongside you, Sandeep, sir, and Rishona. There was so much to learn, and there is now a lot to reinforce. But I believe that the lifeline remains that beauty lies in simplicity. We might try to complex situations, but deep down, we're all the same man who used to live with nature to now the man who has built homes in seclusion away from the abode of wildlife and nature. We are the only species with the power to share our feelings with the world, and well, we should use this power wisely. And with that, we come to the end of our podcast. Comment below and let us know if you liked our podcast. If you want to be a part of similar podcasts, join us. We hope to meet you again soon. That's all for us today.
We are here at my good school. Things here are so cool. Together we learn, together we create, together we meditate. Everyone is welcome. Teachers here are awesome. We learn good values, we learn many skills. We soar above the hills. Let's shout it out, hey, let's all be proud, hey, hats off to my good school. Just what we need, hey, for us to succeed, hey, are all here in my good school.